Is ISIS Islamic? For a long time, I thought this question had an obvious answer. When I looked at ISIS, I saw a group that openly embraced things that most Muslims seemed desperate to explain away. Slavery, concubinage, hudud punishments, military jihad. Every time I investigated one of these issues, I kept running into the same uncomfortable reality. The sources often appeared much closer to ISIS than to the average Muslim I encountered in the modern world. The average Muslim told me Islam means peace, tolerance, human rights, and coexistence. But when I opened the Quran, the Hadith, and the early historical sources, I found something much more complicated. I found a religion that included warfare. I found a religion that included slavery. I found a religion that included harsh punishments. I found a religion that was deeply political. As a result, I began to develop a simple theory. Maybe ISIS was telling the truth about Islam. Maybe everyone else was reinterpreting the religion to fit modern sensibilities. Maybe ISIS, for all its brutality, was actually the closest thing to the Islam of Muhammad. That was my starting point, but after thinking about this issue more carefully, I realized there was a major flaw in my reasoning. I was judging modern Muslims on the entirety of Islam, while judging ISIS on only a handful of controversial issues. In effect, I was asking whether ISIS got slavery right, whether ISIS got jihad right, whether ISIS got hudud right. But I was not asking whether ISIS got everything else right. And that is where the investigation became much more difficult. Suppose a student gets the hardest questions on an exam correct, but fails half of the remaining questions. Can we automatically call him the best student? Not necessarily. The same principle applies here. Even if ISIS was closer to Muhammad on slavery, concubinage, hudud, and military jihad, that would not automatically make ISIS the closest representation of Muhammad overall. To answer that question honestly, I would have to compare ISIS against the entirety of Muhammad's teachings. And once I started doing that, one issue kept rising to the surface. Takfir, the practice of declaring other Muslims to be unbelievers. This matters because ISIS did not merely fight non-Muslims. ISIS fought large numbers of Muslims. ISIS declared large numbers of Muslims to be apostates. ISIS's entire worldview depended on determining who counted as a true Muslim and who did not. The more I thought about it, the more I realized that this question might be even more important than slavery or hudud. After all, if ISIS was wrong about who was actually a Muslim, then many of its later actions become questionable, even according to its own standards. This forced me to reconsider my assumptions. I had spent years noticing where modern Muslims seem to reinterpret Islam. But was I applying the same skepticism to ISIS? Was ISIS faithfully following every part of Muhammad's teachings? Or was ISIS emphasizing some teachings while neglecting others? The answer was no longer obvious, and that realization changed my perspective. Today, I still think many modern Muslims present an incomplete picture of Islam. I still think the historical Muhammad was far more political, military, and legalistic than many modern portrayals suggest. The Muhammad of Medina was not simply a spiritual teacher. He was also a ruler, a judge, military commander, and state builder. Ignoring those aspects of his life distorts history. However, I no longer think that recognizing those facts automatically leads to ISIS. That is a crucial insight. ISIS may have preserved some genuine aspects of early Islam that many Muslims prefer not to discuss, but that does not mean ISIS preserved the whole picture. In fact, the strongest challenge to ISIS is not whether slavery existed in Islam. The strongest challenge is whether ISIS correctly understood Muhammad's teachings regarding Muslims themselves. Who counts as a Muslim? When may Muslims be fought? How easily may someone be declared an unbeliever? What limits exist on warfare? Those questions are just as important as slavery and jihad. And once I began taking those questions seriously, my confidence in ISIS as the truest Islam began to weaken. So where do I stand today? My conclusion is neither of the popular answers. I do not think ISIS can honestly be dismissed as completely un-Islamic. That claim ignores too much evidence. ISIS clearly drew from real Islamic texts, real Islamic traditions and real aspects of early Islamic history. But I also no longer believe that ISIS represents the purest or truest form of Islam. That conclusion is too simplistic. My current view is that ISIS captured some genuine aspects of Muhammad's religion while simultaneously distorting other major aspects of it. In other words, ISIS was neither completely faithful to Muhammad nor completely disconnected from him. It was a movement rooted in authentic Islamic traditions that, in my judgment, also made serious mistakes in how it interpreted and applied those traditions. So if someone asks me, is ISIS Islamic? The answer is yes, in the sense that it emerged from genuine Islamic sources. But if they ask me whether ISIS is the closest representation to Muhammad's Islam overall, my answer is no longer yes. The evidence is far more complicated than that. And after examining the issue carefully, I believe the most honest conclusion is this. ISIS reflected part of Muhammad's Islam. It did not reflect all of it.